This is the Eureka Specialita Smart, and you're now watching my concise short summary of our full review video. Check it out. It doesn't exactly look smart. It still largely resembles a Eureka, but it features a few new smart capabilities on its much larger display here. You've now got a digital grind indicator display. So the grinder tells you I'm at grind 15 right now, precisely. So my burrs are set more or less this far apart. And that's shown here based on the grind size adjustment. If I adjust the grind size now, I can display this here. I'm currently at 16, then I'm at 17. Now I'm back to 16 or 15. After exiting this menu, I can now see this grind size indicator displayed here. Not just a grind size display, you also have a recipe display available. A save option. So you can, for example, save your settings. I made the espresso compadre with grind setting 28, and it stays saved there as a note with a set recipe, exactly as it was originally saved. At first, it all sounds nice and good, but there are some tangible problems. I have to say, the Smart comes across like a student who thinks he knows everything but can't actually do anything. Because the grinder regularly forgets its actual setting, especially since it's new and you can see how the distance between the burrs is. That means it can happen that it turns itself off and back on. And then it tells you, I'm not at 15 anymore, I'm at 16. And that doesn't just happen when you switch it off and on. It also happens while it's running. You set the grind cleanly to 17. You look away from the machine. You mess around with the cups, grab a rag, come back to the grinder, and it says, hey, I've changed my mind. I'm actually at 16 now. So you go ahead and adjust the grind size based on that information, which really isn't actually true, to be honest. Because you were on the grind setting you'd set earlier. So make it finer now to get back to 15. And by doing that, you're changing the grind size, which of course then also leads to that change. That the espresso then flows differently, that's a problem. But now you have a really handy feature, the thumbs up function. Feels a little bit off to me because, I mean, this feature lets you say that it was actually a really bad espresso. So it lets you provide feedback to the machine. You would say something like, we actually wanted to pull a 27-second espresso, but it ran 38 seconds because the grind size was too fine. Then the grinder gives you a recommendation. We can try it here. So I say I wanted exactly 27 seconds, but I actually had an extraction time of 38 seconds. So the grinder tells me to go much coarser, go from a 15 to a 23 then. So that is great for the moment. You have to say that it works better with some coffees than with others. We achieved somewhat better results with darker roasts overall, but we repeatedly ended up with poor results whenever the grind size setting shifted unexpectedly. And then if it suddenly shows you're at grind setting 14 when you were at 15 before, or you're at grind setting 20 and you were at 19 before, then the reference point isn't the same anymore and retuning the recipe won't work either. And that means the grinder makes dialing in the espresso a lot more complicated than it needs to be in actual practice overall. So it's the exact opposite of the idea. The grinder is supposed to show beginners, home baristas, like you can easily dial in espresso, and instead it regularly points you the wrong way because the signpost, their own signpost or point of reference, is fundamentally wrong actually, or simply pointing the wrong way. The grinder has a few more smart features. For instance, it can, or at least thinks it can, fine-tune the amount it grinds. Why is that interesting and actually a cool feature? If you set the grind size finer, you generally end up with less coffee in the cup, or rather not in the cup. You're grinding into a portafilter, so you end up with less coffee coming out. That means you have to grind a bit longer. The grinder knows that and will tell you to grind a little more, or it adjusts its grind time by itself. Unfortunately, it was very rarely precisely on the mark, so the targeted grind output actually matching the target amount only happened to us in the very rarest of cases as far as we experienced. Other than that, you've got a solid Eureka Specialita here with lots of the typical Specialita features. We've known this grinder for years. It's tried and tested. It just has a solid particle distribution that lets you pull a good espresso. The speed's quite solid. We hit 18 grams of coffee in 11 seconds. That's a great figure, or a pretty solid one for a home grinder. The retention is considerable. We've got 5.7 grams of retention, And that's another correction we need to make compared with the retention measurements we did 3-4 years ago on the old Specialita, as a matter of fact. Today we've got a new test protocol, and we remeasured this grinder and its predecessor, and now we're at exactly 5.7 grams. This leaves us with a temporary retention of 3.5, while the rest is absolute. You could program this on the unit button here to have the grinder dispense the corresponding amount. Due to the changing grind size setting, and because of the fact that it is now displayed digitally here, and the fact that you have no display on your grind adjustment dial anymore at all, replicating the grind, in other words, getting back to the exact same setting, is almost entirely impossible without doubt. And that's precisely where your best saved recipes and notes won't help you at all. If you're ultimately aiming for grind setting 25 and you select that number, it is simply not the same 25 that you had dialed in the last time you used that setting. So it becomes more difficult to reliably return to the exact same recipe you previously perfected. One must admit that the predecessor was considerably simpler and more solid, especially in combination with the large king-size grind adjustment wheel. With that, you could simply jot down the setting on a piece of paper, return to it later, and be precise again. In contrast, the supposedly super precise 17-step grind display here ultimately proves to be less precise. Consequently, despite its good concept, or perhaps precisely because of the concept combined with an inaccurate implementation, this grinder hits a brick wall. Because it doesn't work as intended, the smartness is actually the exact opposite. The smartness causes you to make a noticeably worse espresso overall, makes you less precisely on the mark every single time, and means you will have to pull more shots to dial the espresso in. I say this having watched Michel, our barista trainer and head of the coffee school, struggle to dial in the machine with this grinder, since he needed far more reference points. Because he followed the instructions even though, given his level of expertise, really indeed had already anticipated that the grinder might have reported one thing or another incorrectly. So we think you can dial in your espresso much more easily with the predecessor, and that your smartness, the smartness of this grinder, is clearly far surpassed overall. And on that note, we now come to this rather critical, thoughtful conclusion indeed about the Eureka Specialita Smart overall. From our point of view, that wasn't a step forward, but 3 steps back. Sometimes the move into digital and so-called smart just isn't worth it if it undermines a grinder's essential basic functions, compromising what those core systems are meant to do. And the most important basic function is a precise grind size setting we can depend on. Today, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow. Thanks everyone for watching this short version. Feel free to subscribe to the channel, you're warmly invited. Every week I write a newsletter about everything to do with the new videos and the videos of the week. I'd really love it if you join. That way you often find out beforehand what the video will be, or you can even vote on which video gets filmed or shown next. See you soon. Take care. Bye for now.